I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to Conversations with Al McFarlane. This edition of Conversations with Al McFarlane is brought to you by Comcast, working to bridge the digital divide through internet essentials and partnering with organizations across the Twin Cities to help make our region an even better place to live, work, and play. Organizations like Ain Da Young Center. I'm pleased to have as a guest Deb Foster. She's the Executive Director of Ain Da Young Center. Ain Da Young is Ojibwe. It means our home. And pleased to talk about a new addition, an expansion of the work of Ain Da Young. In fact, announcing the opening this fall of Minooski. Ain Da Young, the name means good new home. You are providing a home, an environment, an option, a place for addressing the phenomenon, the tragedy of homelessness among youth. You're focusing primarily on young people in the 18 to 24-year-old range. And your initiative is culturally responsive, designed to assist our American Indian young people with a safe place for cultural healing and growth. Among things you provide, life skills training and educational support, helping people become independent and self-sufficient. Deb Foster, thank you for being here. Let me just say that, talk about your education, your background. You've got a master's degree in marriage and family therapy, I think it is, right? From University of Wisconsin Stout, and a bachelor's degree in special education and elementary education from University of Wisconsin Eau Claire. You've worked for 20 years in the field. You've
more than that, yeah.
At least 20, more than that. But the work includes, program development and management, fundraising for community based nonprofit organizations, including serving as Director of Development and Communication for the Minnesota Coalition for Battered Women, Executive Director for Lendale Neighborhood Association, and the Membership and Marketing Director for YMCA. And you've been at the center, at Ain Da Young Center, for almost 10 years, 9.5 years. I mentioned that a new home is almost a new expansion. It's coming online. That's going to be a 42-unit building. You kind of end at the tail end of a massive capital campaign. You're 98% on target and complete with a $15 million development initiative that plans to be open to the work in September of this year. Congratulations, first of all.
Oh, thank you.
And thank you for what you do. I want to start by talking about the vision, though. What is the vision of the organization? Why did it come into existence, and how difficult has it been, but how rewarding has it been to be there and to be present in the lives of the community?
Well, the Ain Da Young Center started back in the early 80s. Originally, there was the Red School House, which was one of the first American Indian schools predominantly for American Indian students in the 70s. And so towards the end of the 70s, they discovered that the children were still struggling, even though they were getting great education and culturally responsive work, and found out that the kids were homeless, or they were with families that were homeless. And so they decided, if we're going to truly assist our folks, then we need to make sure that they're housed. And so that's a group of leaders from the Native community brought the building on Portland and Lexington, which is now our emergency shelter and our main headquarters. And from there, over the years, we have just numerous groups of people over the years have just continued to respond to the needs of our families and young people. So, and we provide a safe place for healing and educational goals and workforce support. We provide an emergency shelter for young 5 to 17-year-olds. We also have a transitional living program for 16 to 22-year-olds. We also do family advocacy. We also provide ICWA support for our families. We have a ICWA court monitor that goes into the Ramsey County courts and makes sure that ICWA is being abided by. We also provide legal services, children's mental health services, a lot of cultural teachings and experiences, because we know in our community, in order for us to truly move beyond the historical trauma that lasted into the 80s and early 90s, that reestablishing a sense of identity of who we are and who they are as young Native people is first and foremost. And so all of our work is geared around that.
Let's talk about historical trauma. That's so important, and to a degree, I think society has wanted to ignore the existence and the impact of historical trauma. Society wanted to turn and tell Native people that whatever problems you have are your personal problems. It's not anything that's cultural even, or culture is not part of this. It's your individual deficiency or failing.
Yes.
But that's wrong.
It is very wrong.
And it's pernicious. It's really intentional wrongness, damaging. And you are responding and addressing that.
We are, as are many other agencies as well. You know, people oftentimes think, well, the historical trauma was so long ago, get over it, kind of a thing. And the fact of the matter is that the boarding school era lasted into the 80s and 90s. And it was in 1978 that the Religious Freedom Act came to play. And up until that point, it was illegal for us to even have powwows or to do our ceremonies or practice what we practice and our teachings and traditions. People were jailed, sometimes killed. It was also in 1978 that the ICWA Indian Child Welfare Act came to be. Up until that point, children were continuing to be ripped out of their families' homes, placed in other homes or in boarding schools, not to mention all of the physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse that happened to our people. And so we have youth walking in our doors today that are being raised by grandparents and parents who were potentially in the boarding school era, which was designed, of course, to strip everybody of their teachings, their language, everything. And so our young people are struggling with that sense of Native identity, or worse yet, they have a sense of negative identity. And so we see it every day. Then our kids walk in our doors, and with this new project, that healing and that cultural reestablishing that Native identity, that positive pride, and what it truly means to be American Indian, and how that just changes who they are and their visions and their hope. And so that's why we do that first, and then we move on to the other
I suspect
goals.
that as you succeed in encouraging and nurturing that self-discovery, that discovery of identity and the confidence that comes with that, not only are you healing that individual and his or her family and sort of moving towards a certain restoration in the family and the community, I suspect that this process is part of the healing of the entire nation, that America won't be healed until there is healing in the American Indian community, until we can't ignore the trauma, we can't ignore being on either side of it as the perpetrators or as the institutions that allowed it and sustained it or ignored it. And so until we finally get to where we both encourage and develop and nurture and elevate the dignity that comes with identity, the country itself won't find where it's got to go. That's what I think. What do you think?
Yeah, I actually really appreciate you bringing this up, because I think it is, it's unfortunate that the issues that we're seeing in our communities, and granted the homelessness youth homelessness in the state of Minnesota, American Indians have the highest disparities. And
only 2% of the population
lives, in Minnesota. Of the 2%, if you look at the homeless youth arena, we're 22% of the homeless youth that are on our streets, and that's just unacceptable. We are also, unfortunately, dealing with many other disparities, educational and so forth, but it's because of the trauma that is still very, very, very present. And so we have an opportunity now with our young people to help them turn that corner and to reestablish who they are as young people and be able to move forward in a positive way and become future leaders and teachers of our language and teachers of our traditions and bring back, you know, we take kids to ceremonies and sun dances and so forth. And so we're just hoping that this will, and we know it will, it is going to provide a generation of young people that will be able to move this even further for our communities.
What do you think is going to be happening at your new facility? What kinds of services, what additional things are you able to do with the new facility coming online? And then I want you to mention, you know, you've got partners in community, some people that get it, and people that stand up and show up the right way with the right resources and access. Anything you want to say about that? You're welcome
Absolutely. This is a partnership organization project. Starting with some leaders from the community, but more importantly, young homeless youth. We're a big part of designing this vision and talking about what it is this building needed and where they wanted it, what they wanted it to look like, what they wanted it to include, is all a part of this project. And so they were very much leaders in that. It is designed, as you said, for the 18 to 24-year-olds because kids are aging out of foster care at 18. They're losing all of their benefits for simply turning 18. They've exhausted their housing opportunities. And so they're falling right back into homelessness again. And so that is why we're focusing on that age range. The entire building was built specifically for the teachings of our culture and traditions.
Marvelous.
So the external part of the building is beautifully designed by DSGW and First Nations design. Mike Lavendor, who is a Native architect, also Loeffler, Native-owned and woman-owned, is a part of the construction. And we're also co-owners with Project for Pride in Living, PPL, who has done a lot of work in the American Indian community as well. And then not to mention the fabulous management team at ADYC that have been a part of this. Also, Fox Advancement has also been our terrific team for us in the whole capital campaign. So, yes, many, many partners who have come together. Our legislators have been super supportive of this, Minnesota Housing, and so we've been very fortunate and very blessed in that respect. And so because of that, we are now building a building. It's, like you said, due to open late September. The lower level, like I said, is designed, has a cultural activities center designed specifically to have sewing machines and things like that so that young people can make their own regalia. They can do their beadwork. There's another room specifically designed to soak hides so that our young people will be able to stretch hides and make their own drums. We're going to have a food and clothing room as well. We're also going to have something like a credit store or a small mini Walmart, or not Walmart, but like a Walgreens, a CVS, where kids can go and purchase items with vouchers.
Retail operation, yeah.
And they can work there and gain some soft, work skills. First level is going to be offices. We're going to have a huge training and cultural center. There's also a workforce center. We'll be doing a lot of workforce training. And in the basement is also a fitness center. And then on every level, there's a circular gathering center. This is where we'll be doing a lot of the teachings and of culture and history. There's also teaching kitchens on each floor, so we can teach healthy cooking and living, not to mention gathering centers. And then in the green space on the outside, on one end, we're going to have a section for a sweat lodge. And so we'll be able to have sweats right on site, which will be wonderful and rare in the inner city. Also a medicine garden, so youth will be able to plant our medicines and harvest them in the fall, as well as a water element. So all of the four elements.
Everything being taught and learned, yeah.
So yeah, so once we provide each youth with, depending on where they're at, with a new renewed sense of who they are as young Native people, we will then move forward, and each kid will have a case manager, and we'll help them achieve their goals, whether it's education, gainful employment, life skills, everything from banking to how to write a resume, with the ultimate goal, of course, obviously, for youth to eventually become independent, proud, and self-sufficient.
I think you are the phenomenal optimist. I feel it in this optimism in your storytelling, and it's wonderful. And I think you believe, and you can tell me if I'm right or wrong, that there is a brilliant and responsive future ahead for our children, for the children, and for the culture, and for the community. And I think that it's about staying true to oneself and one's identity, to insist on being oneself. Does that make sense at all?
Yes, it does. And you know, you really have no choice but to stay optimistic. And I think part of the optimism is the fact that we see this every day. We see these kids that are struggling with homelessness come into our shelters and our transitional living, and they're just lost and angry and hopeless and just dealing with a lot of trauma. And once we help them establish and turn that around, and I mean just watching them heal and watch them understand that, okay, so this isn't my fault. This, that, there is a true meaning of what it means for me to be a young American Indian person, that this isn't my fault. And so they really just it just creates the platform that they need to then be able to focus on what their personal goals might be. And so it's priceless. We see it every day, so we know it's going to happen.
Well, listen, I want to thank you for what you are doing. Thank you for the work, the passion, the strength that you bring to the work. My guest, Deb Foster, Executive Director of Ainda Young Center, their new expansion coming online in September, Minooski Ainda Young, meaning good new home, a way to help young people have a safe place for cultural healing and growth. Thank you so much, and continued good work.
Oh, thank you, and thank you for having us here. And the Ainda Young and the team at the Ainda Young has been a big part of this. This is certainly not something I've done on my own at all. And so I just really appreciate the opportunity to be here and talk about it.
Well, our goal is to tell the story. I think our job is to let our communities know that great work is afoot, that people operate with integrity and with just the spirit, and that they are guided by the spirit, and that they are succeeding as we speak, that you are succeeding as we speak. And so there's confidence in that, and the model of that inspires everybody else to do better and be better, to find our best selves. I'm Al McFarlane. This is Conversations with Al McFarlane, and we'll talk to you next time.